let's get started. Today, the 22nd of September, brought to you by this crew and our different points of view on the topic. And the topic today, the intranet is dead. Long live Microsoft Teams. Something you hear occasionally in the resources slide that we do at the end of this. You'll see I just went and gathered from some of our key partners their take on this, and each of them has an article out there in the last year about when would you need Teams, when would you need SharePoint, et cetera. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We don't actually believe that the internet is dead, but we'll talk about why. This is how we'll structure it. Talk about the technologies. We'll define what we're talking about in terms of intranet. We'll talk about the reality on the ground, maybe even prescribe some things. So here's what we've been asked. Are SharePoint intranets dead? Should they just all be apps in Teams? And secondarily, should everyone only see the content based on their work? Like, I should only see content that's specific to the team that I'm in. You know our answer. If you know us, and you know any SharePoint consultant, our favorite answer is, well, it depends. Let's talk about the business case. Let's talk about the use case, et cetera. There are some organizations where it might make complete sense. Let's talk about why and where that's the case. So somebody went and mined Wikipedia for this. Does anybody want to talk about this definition?
Yeah, I'm proud of myself for going to Wikipedia and copying and pasting this. So
well, yeah, and Control C, Control V skills are.
Yeah, but I was the one who positioned it, though. I'm like, as we're arguing about whether somebody should have an intranet or not, shouldn't we all agree on what an intranet is? And that's when Anderson.
But you notice that I applied some bold italics. That's me, okay? That wasn't Wikipedia. So we really were talking about, let's talk about intranets and stuff. And it wasn't that we don't know what one is, but we wanted to see what the definition of one was to see if we had it right. And so this is what Wikipedia says. And I think that what I bolded and italicized is actually the most important part. It's a webby thing that is used by people only inside an organization.
Yeah, and part of the reason that I brought that up is one of the things that we love at Simpraxis is taking things literally and pedantry or however. And so we just, as we were talking about this and talking about the different edge cases of the intranet, we wanted to make sure that everybody listening was talking about the same kind of thing, because not all intranets are the same to all people. And when this came up, that phrase, usually to the exclusion of access by outsiders, that pretty much, I feel like, crystallized everybody's cases of what the intranet was. But that was, so I thought it was good for us to make sure that we were all in discussion. I'd be curious, those of you in the audience, if this fits your thoughts on what your intranet is or what it should be.
We have a thumbs up.
We have a thumbs up, so we're good. And I think it's
that's all it takes.
This article mentions the intranet, which is available to everybody on the planet who has a connection to the internet. And then there's, of course, the other term, extranet, which is generally used for an organization to work with the exact people who are excluded from the intranet, right? It's for the people on the outside of their company, like vendors and partners and whatever else, the people that you're working out there. So, you might be using Teams for your intranet, extranet, and not internet, but different aspects of things.
I want to highlight something, though.
I see that you are highlighting. Whew.
I thought maybe a 5-year-old had gotten in here and was scribbling on our
some voles. This is for me. This is for me like a branch, a fork in the road, though. Talking about collaboration tools, and I'll use a couple of examples. Right, I'm primarily working on a client that is in about 80 some odd countries, about 50,000 people. Their intranet is very news centric, keeping people apprised of what's happening in the organization, as well as connecting them to the tools they need to do their job. But the collaboration tools, even though they sit on the same platform, they're doing a lot of collaboration with SharePoint and team sites, et cetera. That's not considered part of their intranet. Their intranet is the network of communication sites that they use to keep people informed. So it's a little bit less collaboration centric. And I was thinking, Mark, you're working with a lot of law firms, and most of their operations are in client and matter types of things, and very collaboration centric, maybe with a weak tie to the corporate news. et cetera. People just care about what they care about inside their practice area or their clients or their matters. Is that a vector in the degree to which I should be weighted towards SharePoint versus Teams, or whether I need SharePoint at all?
Well, I mean, and we can take technology out of it, right? So, on an intranet, you're typically communicating out to a larger population than yourself, right? So it's more of a broadcast mechanism. But then there are other things that that entire organization needs to access, which is a back and forth, right? An IO, not just an O, right? So, for example, I might go to recommend somebody for an award inside the company. Well, that's collaborative because you're actually talking to the person who manages that. There's probably a little bit of a process and a workflow and stuff like that. That's collaboration, or at least it's a part of the collaboration landscape. So it's not that you only are broadcasting. There are solutions, if you will, in place in any intranet that make them collaborative. And we often will, always will try to bring some notion of people's work into the intranet too, because if it's just a place you go when you're not trying to accomplish anything, you don't really go there, right? You want it to be a place that you want to travel through to get things done, and not just things like open enrollment once a year.
Yeah, I think the big miss here is in that kind of long-lived Teams piece of it, is we're talking about the user experience, and the user experience is really all about your corporate culture, be you a small company, be you a large company, and what the culture is. So the viewport that you get your collaboration tools, that you get your content that's directed to you, i.e. news or whatever it is, has zero to do with the user experience that works for you. And I think that's just a huge miss about this. We don't use SharePoint, we use Teams. Well, that's not, they're both, SharePoint and Teams are both viewports into content that you either collaborate on or that you're, consuming or whatever. And that's not the intranet. The tool is not the intranet. The user experience is not the intranet. The intranet is the conglomeration of all those things that make your organization work digitally. Maybe I add that. Oh, I got a clap. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, people do say we need a new intranet. What they really mean is we need to improve our communication. We need to provide better solutions. We need to, whatever it is, right? We often phrase what we're trying to accomplish in terms of a technology, which is really backwards, right? Sometimes we do have clients come to us and say, we're really focused on improving our internal communications. What would you recommend for that? And then the word intranet comes into that conversation pretty quickly, but it isn't about the fact that it's not about the tools. It's not about what you actually call it. It's about what outcomes you're trying to get to. What are the results of this effort that you're talking to us about? That what would success look like? And sometimes we do talk to people who say, well, by 12/1 I have a new intranet. Well, to us, that's not a success factor. That is, you've just met your deadline and maybe you're getting a bonus, but that doesn't do the rest of the organization any good unless you have outcomes that you actually have as a product of that work.
Yeah, Greg just posted in the chat, if you build it, they will come as only in the movies. And that's so true, right? If you're not driving an outcome, if people don't need the things you're building, and that's sort of that, oh, I have some great ideas, let me build a whole bunch of stuff, and nobody really needed that stuff, then that's a waste. So you didn't direct at the user experience and the outcomes that you needed to have happen. You just started putting stuff up there. And that's the sort of, oh, we need an intranet, let's just throw some stuff out.
And some of that rhetoric does come from software vendors like Microsoft.
Yeah.
If you only have this, then you will be better at that. And that's just not true.
Here's a good question from Joy. Is Viva Connections intended to be a replacement for the intranet?
Ooh, that's she's about 4 slides ahead of us.
All right. Well, let's
table
park
that and
Okay.
talk about that in the context.
Let's not answer that one yet, right?
Yeah, let's not spoil that one.
We're going to
But
table.
you're asking the right question.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And
Let's-
part of that is, again, the marketing positioning of that phrase.
Let's go from definition to kind of what we see in reality. I added a couple things to things that you need, but Mark, do you want to take the lead on this, or who else?
Well, I mean, if you think about when you want to communicate to people, sure, I'll take the lead. If you want to communicate with people, you have to have some way to represent the content that you want to communicate, right? I mean, we can be talking to each other like we are on this call, or we could when we're sitting in a room together. But in reality, when you're setting things up to sort of send information out to an organization, you need some kind of like web page kind of thing. You need some kind of document-based content. Sometimes, a Word document or a PDF makes good sense. You often, especially these days, you have a lot of videos, recordings of company meetings or, advertisements that you've run outside that you want people in the organization to understand. Images like logo types and other stuff that you use as a part of your sort of brand and representation of what your organization is all about. So for all of those things, those all are important to sort of make up an intranet. You have to represent the content that you need to communicate. Want me to do the rest of it?
Yeah, and then the sense making of it.
Yeah. So if we just created a whole bunch of pages, dropped a whole bunch of documents into a bunch of folders, we would have no better mess than what people have in file shares historically, right? Where you just have a lot of content out there. And if you want to know what the policy is for paid time off, you have to go and find Betty in HR and actually have a conversation with her, because she's the only one who knows where that document is. So you need a good information architecture. You need some way to represent the groups within the organizations, and that maybe it should be a small g, because it's actually groupings of people who have some sort of common interest, role, whatever it is, not so much the technology. You need to be able to.
That can mean either audiences or security groups, permission groups.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think about it sort of just technology free. It's really about understanding that the five of us on this with our cameras on represent a different kind of person in this call, for example, than the other people. But that doesn't mean that we're the only group. We also have who's the tallest, or who likes the color blue. There are representations. Todd and I like blue. Representations of groups of people that have some sort of commonality, so that you can say, let's tell this kind of person that, let's tell that kind of person this stuff. Some way to search across all of this, because eventually there will be use cases where your information architecture isn't perfect. People can't just zoom right to it because all of your navigation makes total sense. So having a way to go and pluck things out, sort of the instead of talking to Betty, you just type something in and a document shows up. And then, like you added that word, so context, what is the meaning of this thing? A great example of context is when people put press releases on their intranet from outside and provide no information about it internally. They just add the link to a page. Well, what does it mean to me as an employee is a different context than the way we've said that thing to the outside world. So we always want to wrap some words around things. And it's interesting, because that tends to be a lot of struggle for the content owners, because, well, here's the form, I've got the document, here it is, everyone knows what that is. No, everyone never knows what that is, okay? There always has to be some context.
So Mark, I look at context as the work surface. Right, so you and I might be in Teams or in Yammer or in an Outlook email, and I might be upset that my project funding got cut because of Project Magellan. And somewhere on the internet, there's a meaning of a definition of Project Magellan, but I don't know it. right? So now I have context. I'm going to the intranet to look for something very specific for a specific reason because of work I was doing on another platform in another place, right? So that's my context that I'm talking about. I need that definition when I need it in the context of a conversation or other work that I'm doing. That's really what I was thinking about in that context. I don't just go to the intranet to be like, oh, let's see what's new. Like, I'm doing work, and then I need to go to the intranet maybe to find something, either an avenue, a portal to my work, or my work is embedded there, or I need some context wrapped around my work. So if the work service used to be Outlook for a lot of people, now it's more frequently Teams. I mean, look at us in Simpraxis. We spend 80% of our day in Teams.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah.
I think that's also a shift that we've made in the last few years, is going from sort of a communications based portal to more task based designs, right? The concept here is not show everybody everything because everybody needs to see it. It's how do we help improve people's work? How do we help them get to what they need faster to do their jobs faster so that they're doing things more efficiently? And that sort of thinking about that in terms of context, I think really helps say, well, is the intranet does still serve a purpose. That purpose is evolving though, and has been evolving over the years that we've been doing this work.
Yeah, I think historically you've always navigated to everything through a department structure in most organizations.
Yeah.
And that is a totally valid thing. I know HR does benefits, so I'm going to go to the HR site. But that task-based thing, slice at it, it's the same content, but it's, I want to find out what my benefits are. Click here, So it gets you there based on what you're trying to accomplish as opposed to what you know about the organizational structure.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, folks don't care which department owns the travel reimbursement policy. All they care about is how do they get paid for their stuff. Okay. So, it doesn't matter where stuff lives. It matters whether or not people can get to it quickly.
So to kind of
Which
further
is exactly
that context conversation, right? Where does the content live? And even if you're using Teams 95% of the time, the content that sits behind Teams, right? That files tab, etc. Stuff all lives in SharePoint, right?
It's an amazing segue to the Viva Connections question, though.
Yeah, that's literally the next slide, right? Is how do we bring the content and the context?
It's not time yet.
Together.
Not time yet.
I'm just saying.
And I love that quote. Love that quote from Gary Vaynerchuk. Content is king, but context is God, right? So I'm interacting with other people and doing work in Power Apps, in Planner, managing work, in Outlook, in Teams, in Yammer communities, etc. That often provides the context that directs us to the content.
Back in the old knowledge management days, we used to talk about, getting the right information to the right people at the right time. And we said that phrase or that sentence endlessly, and that's really what we have now, right? I'm in a Teams channel where we're working on something specific together, and I have the content I need in order to get that thing done.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's use the name of the technology to talk about how we do this.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that statement. Using the name of the tech, how we do this. I mean, I think this is an enablement tool.
It's a way. Fair point.
Yeah.
I was just joking because the title of the slide is what it is.
It just feels like it's more of a marketing wrapper for bringing your SharePoint visuals and content into the Teams user experience more seamlessly, for lack of a better way to say it. And then the next step of that is sort of that the point that we were talking about, like, I just want to get my thing done, right? Like, I just want to be able to get paid for my reimbursements or whatever. That's where the little mobile version there with the buttons kind of comes in. It's the surfacing task.
The dashboard gets really interesting.
Into more of a dashboard type of view that gives you quick access to the work or pieces of things that you often want to get to quickly. And those are the two pieces of this, right? Surfacing your intranet, meaning maybe the communications platform or whatever use you're using your intranet for, front and center into the Teams user experience where people are spending more of their day, and then creating quick ways through a dashboard of getting work done by either feeding you information or linking you to the thing you need quickly.
The cynic in me, and there is one, is, says, well, all that's happening here is the Teams team is trying to increase their dwell time by bringing in the content that lives in somebody else's platform so that people don't leave this surface. Well, that's the cynical view. But the actual view is, but I'm already there. Why should I have to go somewhere else to see stuff? Now, if I click on that little, Relic Cloud icon in the top left, that's what Viva Connections enables at the most basic level. I see the intranet here. I could also click on another browser tab and see the intranet there. So which one's harder? As an end user, everyone's going to have their own sort of opinion on which is easy and which is hard. But the point really is, let's get the information that people need into the place that they are spending their time.
Right. And if you're spending most of your day chatting in Teams with folks, or working on a document inside of Teams, that might be the right place to have this.
Yeah, and Greg mentions in the chat about content creep and about content being stored in different locations. I like having content available from all the places in many places. So yes, I'm okay with there being another window to it in Teams or in Connections or whatever. Because wherever I'm at, I want to be able to search for it right there.
But there has to be some discipline, right? I think what Greg is talking about is, maybe people put the same document here and here.
Yeah.
What we want to do is store that document, and it also comes to Krista's point. You store something in exactly one place. That HR benefits summary document is in exactly one place in HR. But then you can put different views on top of that information in Teams or in SharePoint or in a task-based navigation system. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. You're always landing on that one single source of truth.
Yeah. And I think having good IA and good metadata is really the key point there, so that you can then surface those policies regardless of which department they actually live in.
Mm-hmm.
The giant document library in the sky does not accomplish this.
No, it doesn't.
If it has really great metadata, it might.
Exactly, but shared documents is not that.
Generally, those two don't go hand in hand. Greg makes a point about, where was that company logo file? And, you're right. I think organizational assets, the organizational image library is a big help there because it's a single source of truth.
And SimPraxis, you could have implemented it, just a few weeks ago. And finally went, wow, I wish we'd done that a while ago.
Wait, what? We have templates for stuff? What?
Yeah. We do. Shocking. And they show right up into the desktop app. Best thing ever.
But you think about it. So that to us is like this revelation. It shouldn't have been, but it was. And so now we see our template. We see the templates inside the Office app. Yes. Your average user will never even know that just happened, right? Yeah. I mean, we all know about it because we talked about it because we were sitting around a table together, which was really cool, and we actually had a conversation about it. But we're a really tiny company. We as technologists, we think, I'll just, I'll turn on Viva Connections and now everyone will have access to the intranet. Well, most people won't even notice. So the Shelley's point is a good one, that you still, no matter what, have to have, good IA, you have to think about context, all this stuff. And you have to give people waypoints. You have to help them understand how to think about getting to something, not just how to get to it.
I often poo-poo it, but that other large corporation that Mike was talking about does these corporate communication rollout things, and it just makes me want to roll my eyes and oh God, it's horrible. But that said, that's just my feeling on it, and the reality is more that that's an important aspect of having these these systems, right? You have to communicate about the fact that they exist. If you roll out Viva Connections so that you have that new icon on the dashboard and you don't tell anybody about it, did it really happen? Did you really roll it out? I mean, it's kind of, I just think there's got to be a really good balance of how often you communicate new things are happening, and how with because too frequent means that, like, the spam emails ads from all the things we've subscribed to, where I just now delete them or unsubscribe from them, doesn't help anything, right? You have to have a good cadence, and you have to develop that corporate communications trust, that when you communicate something, it's going to be really useful, you're going to communicate it clearly, and it's going to help somebody get something done faster, versus the blanket daily emails about this happened and let's cheer on whatever. I don't know.
I love that Twitter account, Crap User Stories. We probably all follow it independently without telling each other. It's sort of like, as a company employee, I want to receive an email that we've rolled out Viva Connections, so that I know that we've rolled out Viva Connections. It tells me nothing. I don't care, right? The communication needs to be well crafted to help people understand why this technical thing we just did actually matters.
Yeah.
And so it's not just a matter of how much communication you're doing, but also what's the quality of that education, and are you writing for the person at the other end, as opposed to you as an IT person, because they won't even care about what you're writing to do that.
So with 3 minutes left, I just want to ask the last question before we talk about some resources and our next session. And the last question is there a use case where a SharePoint-based intranet? I mean, I'm not saying don't use SharePoint, because SharePoint's where a bunch of other stuff is stored anyway. But is there a case, type of business, a use case where SharePoint-based intranet, not really worth it, just use the the full team, the everyone team? Have an all company team, post stuff there, organizational announcements, etc. It's already a work surface that you're in most of your day.
Well, we're an example of a company where that works.
Small companies,
we use the everyone we use the everyone chat, not an everyone team. It's an everyone chat, and that's how we talk to each other.
Yeah.
But
if we didn't have 120 years of SharePoint consulting experience among us, right?
It's like, I'm not that old.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Not each. But we put it all together. If we didn't have that, would we still do it that way?
Yeah. So I'm having some builders build my deck, and there's 6 or 8 of them. The guy that owns the company, sort of techie, he moved all their email into Office 365 100 years ago. They use Teams. That's where all their stuff is at now. They use email for some stuff, but they use Teams for everything else. And I don't think any of the people that work on my deck know what the hell a SharePoint is, but they certainly know what Teams is and use it all the time.
Yep, I've implemented that too. Krista has her hand up. Go, Krista, go.
I just had a question about the everyone team. We don't have that enabled, I don't think, in our organization, and we're really large. So that was part of the reason that we didn't do it. Does that team have the same permissions as a regular team, where members would have a full editing access to the content on the corresponding site? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
So in that case, I would say it'd be hard to find for a large company, if you wanted to sort of manage the information a little bit more closely and have a bit more, hesitate to use the word control, but over the info, as opposed to having everyone in the organization being allowed editing access to it. I'm having a hard time coming up with the context.
Great point. Yeah, in a large organization, I agree, right? You need a publishing and a communication model, whereas in a smaller company, you might just need a collaboration platform.
Yeah.
Well,
and that can be a lot flatter in terms of permissions.
It's a common Yammer use case too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You can set up an everyone team in Teams, or you can set up an everyone group in Yammer, but you have the same problems. I mean, just because you're all of a sudden using Yammer doesn't mean you don't have the problem that anyone can type anything in there. I mean, if you might want some sort of curation, some kind of process, depending on what it is that the discussion's about.
It's easier to ignore Yammer.
That's true.
Valid point.
I've been successfully doing it for like 10 years now.
Yeah.
Not that we have an opinion about that.
Mm-mm.
Future topic sounds like. All right, it's top of the hour. Did flag a couple of. It was funny. I went through our partners, and each of them has this article, like some rendition of this article from them, and they're alphabetical order here. Just going through those from our partners. We also, I think, in 2 weeks' time, Wednesday, October 6th, we want to talk about, as companies grow, either by acquisition or organically, what some of the things are that break, and how we talk about hosting multiple subsidiaries or business units in one tenant. Is there anything else we need to cover? Are there any other questions in the chat?
I'm just going to answer Joy quickly. Joy, the answer is the dashboard is an alternate way to get to the same stuff. Your content is still stored. Files are still in SharePoint. Your conversations are in Teams. The dashboard is an alternate access mechanism. Okay.
And not just into SharePoint, but in line of business applications, right? So if there's a ServiceNow tile on that dashboard or a Workday tile on that dashboard, it can take you right into the system of record too.
That's correct.
By the way, I'm just looking at this
I'll share the
title.
link. We did Viva Connections, these meetings around Viva Connections if you haven't seen it. So maybe go back and check those videos out. I'll post them after the talk.
Yep, and I'm sure we'll have more coming on that as it gets more and more real. For me, the thing, Julie, that made it real wasn't that I can go to a Viva Connections dashboard, is that I can take components of that dashboard and drop them into pages on my intranet, right? Those web parts coming out from Viva Connections, that to me becomes much more real, lets me integrate our work much more closely across our intranet and our collaboration environment.
Cool.
All right.
All right, everybody, thanks again for joining us. We hope to
Thank
talk
you.
to you in 2 weeks. Please feel free to keep the conversation going in the chat, and we'll be posting, obviously, the video and the slide deck as we usually do.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.